Hi, Robin here. I'm going to just briefly talk to you about Lesser Celandine, Ficaria verna, which happens to be growing right at this moment at the end of January. In the Middle Ages, when the sailors had been at sea, as soon as they hit land at this time of year, they would pounce on Lesser Celandine for the green leaves because they were or are really, really high in vitamin C. So it's a plant like that is known as an anti-scorbutic, which means it's anti-scurvy. But now we've eaten Lesser Celandine for thousands and thousands of years. The remains of the tubers goes right back to Mesolithic times. There's a particular site in Colonsay in Scotland and Windmill Hill in Wiltshire where archaeological digs have uncovered Mesolithic use of cooked tubers. There's also Bronze Age sites, Mile Oak in Kent and one in Humberside, I think, where again the archaeological record has shown that humans were eating the roots and the tubers many years ago. The use of this plant is expansive. At a time when we were hunting and gathering and moving around, herders, etc., it was important that we could get energy, and so we would get our energy often from starchy vegetables, and Lesser Celandine was definitely one of the key ones up there. Linnaeus, the Swedish botanist who's responsible for the classification system. So the classification is, the hierarchy of where a species fits within the various kingdoms. So in the plant kingdom, we have Lesser Celandine, which its binomial or scientific name is Ficaria verna. It's also known as Ranunculus ficaria. And that fits within the family of Ranunculaceae, which is the buttercup family. Now, most members of the buttercup family are actually poisonous in the sense that they're not going to kill you necessarily, but they'll upset you and you won't have a nice time. Lesser Celandine, because it's buttercup, has a chemical in it called protonenamine. There's some contemporary uses, like last century, of people kind of in Eastern Europe eating the leaf raw. But go back further and I can't really find much evidence. Now that doesn't mean it's not there, I just haven't come across it in my research. What I have come across is that people in the older days would, when Lesser Celandine was coming up, would scatter sawdust over the young leaf or would put leaf matter over it, which would in effect cut out sunlight, and when it was uncovered, the leaves were white. Now, they used to do that with dandelion, and I think you do that with asparagus as well, but I'm not a grower. When it was white leaf, when it had been blanched and closed, that was when you could eat it raw, because the protonenamine content just hadn't even started. It's a choice for you. A lot of people will tell you that you can eat it pre-flowering. I've had a number of anecdotal reports from people that when they have eaten it raw, even though it was definitely from communities that weren't flowering, they still got that burning sensation, which makes sense because protonenamine is a burning sap. My advice, cook it. In the Middle Ages, beggars would actually crush the plant, get sap on their skin, which would then blister and create sores, a bit like eczema, and they would use that to entice more charity off people. Call it the beggar's blag. In Gallicana in Tuscany, the young leaves gathered in spring with a number of other plants and put into a dish, a soup called minestrella. If you head out to Frisanco in Western Friuli in Italy, there's a tradition in that village where the inhabitants would go out every spring and gather about 30 to 40 different species of wild greens. And within that collection were Lesser Celandine leaves. Now that would be brought back and would be sautéed up with garlic and oil, as far as I can remember. And that's a dish known as pistic, P-I-S-T-I-C. And so we have this tradition of Lesser Celandine with its beautiful starry yellow flower, welcoming the sun. It's almost borderline pagan, these food rituals, these food celebrations in other parts of Europe that we kind of lost over here. And in Eastern Europe, Slovakia, Romania, in Ukraine, etc., the plant is known as a pot herb. I have a reference in my notes that in Russia the leaf is used as a condiment. Now, condiment could be, all manner of things. So I'm not too sure what that means. So it'd be interesting if anyone does know. So when do you gather the tubers? Well, in the historical record after it's flowered, just after it's flowered, because they become too fibrous otherwise. And I do have to qualify this, you do need landowners' permission to gather roots. In the Netherlands, the tubers are, or have been cooked and served like mashed potato, actually. That's as simple as it got. And in Sweden, they were first boiled, and then they were dried, and then they ground into a flour. In Canada, the Snohomish tribal folk, they would cook the tubers on hot rocks in the ground, and then they would dip them in whale fat and seal fat and eat them. And a bit of a delicacy for them, as well as kind of complementing it, pairing that with salmon eggs. And finally, there's a really kind of quite quirky report from Cumbria. The petals and the leaves were used to clean our teeth. I don't know how that works. Maybe they mix them up with salt or something like that.